I'm Clay, just a regular guy. I work as a surgeon, nothing too fancy. My life was pretty routine until that day when everything changed. It all started when I was getting ready for my son, Ned's, graduation party. It was a big day for him, finishing high school and all, and it was important to me that things went smoothly. My wife, Claudia, was in full-on prep mode, running around and making sure every last detail was perfect. That's just how she is. Always on top of things, making sure everything's done right. But lately, something had been nagging at me. There was this strange feeling, something off in the way she'd been acting. My brother, Lowell, was there, too, lending a hand. Lowell and I had always been close, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something between him and Claudia was different. More than I was comfortable with, to say the least. It was the little things, like how they'd exchange these looks that seemed loaded with meaning, or how Claudia would laugh at his jokes in a way she hadn't with me for years. The nagging feeling that something wasn't right only got stronger. Claudia had also started spending more time on her phone, always quick to put it down or change the subject whenever I walked into the room. And then there was Lowell, who seemed to be creeping around the house, sneaking glances and lingering in rooms after Claudia had left. My mind kept circling back to the same suspicion, but I tried to brush it off. I mean, this was my wife and my brother. Still, I couldn't ignore the gut feeling that there was something they weren't telling me. At first, I thought maybe I was just overthinking it. After all, we all know how life gets complicated sometimes, and it's easy to see things that aren't there. But then I noticed more, how Claudia would suddenly become all smiles when Lowell was around, and how she'd turn away to check her phone whenever I was nearby. And it wasn't just that. There was this strange sense of distance between Claudia and me, like we were slowly drifting apart, and I was the only one who noticed. One evening, I was at a coffee shop and ran into a guy named Burke. He was a private investigator, and we got to talking. I don't know what prompted me to tell him about my suspicions, but he listened carefully. He told me about these small, high-tech cameras you could install at home, ones that could record video and audio without anyone being the wiser. At first, I thought it sounded extreme, a bit too much. But then I thought about it, about all the little glances and whispers, and how strange Lowell had been acting. Something inside me felt that I needed to know the truth, no matter what it was. So, I went through with it. I set up cameras in our living room and kitchen, places where Claudia and Lowell often lingered together. I didn't like doing it. It made me feel sneaky, and it wasn't something I ever thought I'd resort to. But I needed to know what was happening in my own house. I needed to see if this feeling was just in my head, or if there was something real behind it. I started watching the footage a few days later, and the first few clips were normal. Claudia making dinner, Lowell helping set the table, nothing out of the ordinary. But then I saw it. Claudia and Lowell, laughing quietly, standing too close. And then, something worse. The kind of thing that blows apart whatever sense of trust you had. It hit me like a punch to the gut. They were having an affair. My wife and my brother, the two people I trusted most. They'd been lying to me, betraying me, right in my own home. I can't even begin to describe the feeling. It was like my world just split apart in an instant, like everything I thought I knew had been a lie. Shock and anger burned inside me, twisting my stomach into knots. I felt hollowed out, like I was a shell of myself. All I could think was, how could they do this to me? After the shock wore off, all that was left was this simmering need to do something about it. I couldn't just sit back and let them get away with it. They'd shattered my life, taken everything I'd built with them and torn it to pieces. I needed to make them feel the weight of what they'd done. I started forming a plan in my mind, something to expose them for the lying, deceitful people they were. I didn't know exactly what I'd do yet, but one thing was certain. I wasn't going to let them walk away from this untouched. They'd hurt me, betrayed me, and now they were going to know what that felt like. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Claudia and Lowell, my wife and brother, were cheating on me. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut, a terrible, disorienting shock. It was like I'd stumbled into a nightmare, one I couldn't wake up from. My mind raced, emotions flooding over me one after the other. Betrayal, anger, heartbreak. I never thought that the two people I trusted most would be the very ones to shatter my world. As the shock wore off, one thing became crystal clear. I had to do something. There was no way I could just sit by and let them carry on with this behind my back, like it was nothing. They'd betrayed my trust in the worst possible way, and I knew I had to confront them. Over the next few days, I gathered every shred of evidence I had. The footage from the cameras, the secret texts I'd found, even the times they'd snuck around behind my back. With every piece of evidence I collected, my resolve hardened. I was prepared for whatever was to come, no matter how ugly it got. When the day came, I called them both into the living room. The tension in the room was almost suffocating. I could see the surprise on their faces as they looked at each other, probably wondering why I'd brought them together like this. My heart was pounding, but I knew I had to stay calm and focused. I took a deep breath and began laying out the evidence, one painful detail at a time. First, I showed Claudia the camera footage. She tried to brush it off at first, her face twisted in denial, but with each new piece of proof, her excuses grew weaker. Her face turned pale, her hands shaking. Lowell just sat there, his head hanging low, barely able to meet my eyes. He looked like a man who'd been caught, fully aware of his guilt. I almost wished he would try to defend himself, but there was nothing he could say to make up for what he'd done. All he could do was sit there, looking like he wanted the floor to open up and swallow him whole. Finally, I confronted them directly, laying it all out, the affair, the lies, and even the money they'd siphoned out of our accounts without me noticing. I wanted them to know I hadn't missed a thing. They looked stunned, as if it had never crossed their minds that I would find out or be prepared to confront them like this. They thought they'd gotten away with everything, but they were wrong. I had every intention of making them pay for what they'd done, to me and to my son, Ned. In the days that followed, I filed for divorce. The legal paperwork was a blur, but the anger and hurt kept me going. I knew I couldn't hide what they'd done, and part of me wanted the world to know the truth. I didn't want to keep quiet, to let them pretend they were innocent or move on without consequence. I wanted justice, not just for me, but to show them that their actions had real repercussions. The process was grueling. I was dealing with the betrayal and heartbreak from losing two of the most important people in my life, all while navigating the legal fallout of a divorce. Some days I barely recognized my own life. It felt like I was just going through the motions, trying to keep everything together. But I couldn't let them ruin my life completely, no matter how much they'd already damaged it. I hired a lawyer, a fierce and determined woman who was more than ready to help me get what I deserved. She was by my side through every tough conversation and every difficult decision. We went to court, and after weeks of back and forth, I won. The judge ordered Claudia and Lowell to pay back every cent they'd taken from me. Even better, they were forbidden from contacting me or Ned ever again. A small but much-needed relief. The whole ordeal left its scars, no question about that. I had to learn how to rebuild my life from the ground up, to trust again after feeling so thoroughly betrayed. It was a hard road, and there were days when I didn't think I'd make it. But I'd come out the other side, stronger than I'd ever thought possible. In the end, I had survived, and I knew I'd thrive again, no matter how hard the journey was. After the divorce, I felt completely lost. I had lost Claudia, the woman I once trusted with my life, and Lowell, my own brother, who had betrayed me in ways I never could have imagined. It felt like they had stolen not just my family, but a part of who I was. The days that followed were heavy. I found myself questioning everything, my judgment, my choices, my sense of stability. But as much as it hurt, I knew I couldn't stay stuck in that place forever. I had to move forward, even if I didn't yet know exactly how. I started pouring myself into my work. I'd always been dedicated to my career as a surgeon, but now it became more than just a job. It became a lifeline. Every time I walked into the operating room, I could leave behind all the pain and focus solely on helping people. I threw myself into my surgeries, spending extra hours at the hospital, perfecting my techniques, and finding a strange sort of solace in the act of helping others. There was something grounding about it, a sense of purpose that brought a little light back into my days. During this time, my relationship with my son, Ned, became my anchor. We started spending more time together, doing things we both loved. We went fishing, played video games, and just talked about life. Small things, big dreams, anything and everything. I wanted to be the father he deserved, someone he could rely on, someone who would never let him down. He'd been through so much already, and I could see the toll it had taken on him. We grew closer than ever, our bond a reminder that family could still mean something real and true. Then, just when I'd resigned myself to the idea that it would be a long time before I could let anyone new into my life, I met Emily. She was a friend of a friend, someone I bumped into at a casual get-together. Emily was kind, intelligent, and thoughtful in ways that felt refreshingly genuine. She seemed to see through the walls I'd put up, sensing that I'd been hurt but never pressing for details. There was an ease in her company, a warmth that softened the jagged edges life had carved into me. Emily and I started spending more time together, and gradually, I allowed myself to open up. She helped me heal in ways I hadn't thought possible, showing me that there was still room in my life for love and trust. Eventually, we fell in love. She understood my past, accepted it, and embraced the future we began to dream of together. Not long after, we got married in a small, intimate ceremony. It was a day full of hope and healing, a moment that marked a new beginning. Life wasn't perfect. There were still days when the shadows of betrayal crept back in, but I found myself happier than I'd been in years. I had a family I could trust, a career I was passionate about, and a future that felt bright again. Through it all, I realized that I'd survived the unimaginable and emerged stronger, carrying a resilience I hadn't known I was capable of. As for Claudia and Lowell, they were left to face the consequences of their actions on their own. From what I heard, they struggled to get by. Their affair, once a secret and thrilling escape, had soured in the harsh light of reality. Both of them lost the respect of friends and family, and eventually, they drifted apart, each left to face their choices in solitude. They'd both lost everything they'd once held dear, all because of the lies and selfishness that had defined their actions. Looking back, I realized that I had learned some of life's most valuable lessons through this painful journey. Trust is a fragile, precious gift, something that can take a lifetime to build and only a moment to destroy. Betrayal is excruciating, but it doesn't have to be the end of the story. Sometimes, it can serve as a catalyst for change and growth, pushing us to become stronger versions of ourselves. I'm grateful for the life I have now, for the family I can lean on, and for the lessons I've carried forward. The challenges I faced left scars, yes, but they've also shaped me into someone who knows the value of resilience, forgiveness, and love. I came out on the other side, no longer haunted by the past, ready to embrace everything life has in store. Time passed, and life continued its relentless march forward. Emily and I found happiness together. We welcomed a beautiful daughter into our family, a radiant light that filled our home with laughter and love. As we navigated the joys of parenthood, I felt a deep sense of gratitude for the life we were building together. Occasionally, thoughts of Claudia and Lowell would cross my mind. I remembered the good times we had shared, the bonds we thought would last a lifetime. But I made a conscious effort not to let those memories consume me. I understood that they were suffering as a consequence of their choices, but I found it hard to muster any sympathy for them. They had made their bed, and now they had to lie in it. One day, out of the blue, I received a call from Alex, the private investigator who had once helped me unveil the painful truth about Claudia and Lowell's affair. His voice was grave, and I could sense the weight of his words even before he spoke them. He informed me that Claudia and Lowell were in serious trouble. They had lost everything, careers, friends, and stability, and were now living on the streets. A pang of pity struck me at that moment. They had once been proud and successful people, and it was heartbreaking to think of how far they had fallen. Despite the betrayal and hurt they had caused me, I couldn't entirely shake the compassion I felt for their plight. They were human beings, after all, and nobody deserves to suffer that way. After some contemplation, I made a decision. I knew I couldn't ignore their suffering, not because I felt obligated, but because I believed in the concept of justice and redemption. I reached out to Alex and asked him to arrange assistance for them. I paid for their rehabilitation, understanding that it was a significant step toward reclaiming their lives. The process wasn't easy. I soon learned that change doesn't happen overnight, and both Claudia and Lowell had a long road ahead. There were moments of frustration and doubt. I questioned whether I was doing the right thing. But with every small step they took toward recovery, I felt a sense of hope for them. It wasn't just about helping them rebuild their lives. It was also about finding my own closure. I also assisted them in finding jobs, knowing that gaining some semblance of normalcy would be crucial for their recovery. There were times when I had to remind myself that my actions were not for their benefit alone, but also for my own peace of mind. Forgiveness is a complicated journey, and I was determined to navigate it as best I could. In the midst of all this, I realized something profound. Forgiveness is not about forgetting the past or excusing the wrongs done to us. It's about letting go of the anger and resentment that weigh us down. I had carried that burden for too long, allowing it to fester and grow. Through my efforts to help Claudia and Lowell, I was slowly releasing the grip those feelings had on me. As I watched them slowly get back on their feet, I felt a shift within myself. I was no longer defined by their betrayal or my past pain. Instead, I was moving toward a future filled with love, hope, and the promise of new beginnings. I had taken control of my narrative, shaping it into something that reflected my strength and resilience. Ultimately, I found peace in the act of forgiveness. I had done my part in helping Claudia and Lowell reclaim their lives, but I understood that it was their journey, not mine. They had to walk the path to redemption themselves. Now, as I looked at my family, I felt a deep sense of contentment. My heart was open, and I was free from the chains of resentment that had once held me captive. I had learned that while life is unpredictable, our responses to it shape who we are. I was grateful for the challenges I had faced, as they had carved out a version of myself that was stronger and more compassionate. With Emily by my side and our daughter in my arms, I was ready to embrace whatever life had in store for us. I had let go of the past, and in doing so, I had opened my heart to the beauty of the present. Years later, I found myself seated in my office, gazing out over the sprawling city. It was a view that I had grown accustomed to, but today, it felt different. I reflected on how far I had come. My life was filled with love, thanks to my wonderful family, and my career as a surgeon flourished. I felt a profound sense of contentment and a clear conscience, having navigated the storm of betrayal and emerged stronger. As I pondered over my journey, thoughts of Claudia and Lowell crept into my mind. I couldn't help but wonder if they had learned anything from their choices. I hoped, in my heart, that they had found some semblance of peace and perhaps even redemption. However, I was acutely aware that their paths would be forever altered. They had lost not only their careers, but also their relationships and reputations. In my reflections, I came to a realization. Forgiveness is not about erasing the past or pretending it didn't happen. It's about letting go of the anger and resentment that can cloud our hearts. It's about moving forward and reclaiming the joy that life has to offer. I had achieved that sense of peace, and it was liberating. Looking out of the window, I felt the weight of the past lift from my shoulders. Before me lay a future filled with hope and promise. I had triumphed over the darkness that once consumed me, and in that triumph, I found my greatest victory. The journey hadn't been easy, but every challenge had contributed to the person I had become. With Emily and our daughter by my side, I was ready to embrace all that life had in store. I had learned to appreciate the beauty of every moment, knowing that the future was bright and full of possibilities.